particular really need acknowledgement. Today, I have the job of setting up covering the most basic topic in vestibular disease, but it is also mysterious. Why is the most simple vestibular disease so confusing? And my aim is to try to have to create some clarity around the fundamentals of this disease so that we can then delve further into the details of things that we don't even know we don't know. And we're going to learn from that from Janet here in the next couple of hours. So we are going to review the 3D anatomy of the actual membranous labyrinth, not the semicircular canals, which are bony, but the membranous semicircular ducts, and understand how understanding that anatomy can improve our understanding of BPPV. We're going to translate that knowledge of anatomy into our understanding of eye movements. If we don't become expert in interpreting eye movements, then we can't proceed very far in the interpretation of and helping patients with BPPV. We're going to review diagnostic maneuvers for BPPV variants and treatment maneuvers, and I'm going to leave you with a practical model for use in the clinic, and so that you can pass on to your patients and students. We have a handout. I have some cards. They'll be at the back of the room. These are simple cards just to remind you, for those of you who are not already expert in eye movement interpretation, it's helpful to have a little card that you can hold next to the patient when they're in the Hallpike right and left positions to remind yourself what you're seeing with the eye movements. You have the slides in your handout. There are more slides in your handout than I'm going to show today. All of the videos here are on my YouTube channel. There's a patient instruction sheet that's very useful that you can also download by Googling dizziness homework, Tayshido, and that has QR codes. And this is the way I give homework to my patients with BPPV and make sure they're doing the right kind of exercise. They can imitate a video better than they can follow a printed instruction sheet most of the time. And of course, I want to introduce you to a tool for visualization and study of otolith disease, which I developed called the BPPV Viewer. So let's talk about the 3D anatomy of the labyrinth. We have, obviously, the membranous labyrinth, which is of extreme importance in understanding BPPV because this is where it all takes place. Now, this is the utricle. It's like a complex bagpipe of openings. We have the macula of the utricle, and then nearby are the crista of the lateral and the anterior canals. At the bottom of the utricle is the infundibulum of the posterior canal, or the short arm of the posterior canal. Here's the posterior canal ampulla and the crista. This is the crankcase of the inner ear. You can imagine this is where otoliths which shed off of the utricle find their way. We have the saccule, which is connected by the utriculosaccular duct to the utricle, but these otoliths do not have much role in otolith disease. These otoliths do not find their way into the membranous semicircular ducts. The innervation is easy to remember because the superior vestibular nerve innervates the three organs which are clustered together, the crista of the anterior and lateral canals and the macula of the utricle. And the more diminutive inferior vestibular nerve innervates only two of the organs. That it would be the macula of the saccule and the crista of the posterior canal. So in terms of fibers, we have many more superior vestibular nerve fibers. We have many more superior vestibular neuromas. We have many more cases of superior vestibular neuronitis. But you can actually have patients who have an individual case of superior vestibular neuronitis or inferior vestibular neuronitis. A person with superior vestibular neuronitis has injury to the utricle and is more likely to have post-neuronitis BPPV. We all have otoliths. We're born with them. We really don't know how fast they turn over in man. We know that they're calcium carbonate. They're not completely crystal. They are a composite of protein and crystal. They can be absorbed by dark cells in the labyrinth by a pinocytotic process. They have 4 separate proteins which have been defined, that some in the core, some in these channels which join the core to the surface, other proteins which wrap the surface of the otolith, and then another protein which acts like a hairnet binding otoliths adjacent to one another together on the macula. Only about 40% only 60% of the otolith is actual crystal. And so you can imagine when otoliths degenerate, they leave protein behind in the endolymphatic fluids. These can cause complications, probably. They can cause density differences and may explain some phenomena which we see but don't understand in otolith disease. Otoliths are not spheres. People who have done mathematical modeling of otolith disease with hydrodynamic equations always use spheres as models for the otoliths, but otoliths are very unique. Hexagonal rods with rhombohedral faces, they fall horizontal. They probably have more drag than a sphere of the same mass, and we haven't accounted for the actual activity and drag of otoliths in their actual geometry in current studies, but this is being done with natural otoliths in Utah by Rick Rabbit as a result of some recent discussions with him. We get BPPV because of degeneration of the otolithic membrane and release of these otoconia at a rate that is faster than that which they can be absorbed. So there are many cases which we believe are completely idiopathic. There is some increase in incidence with age after a vestibular neuritis, especially a superior vestibular neuritis, will have a secondary BPPV because of the release of otoliths. And we see these cases rather clearly. Trauma can dislodge them. Patients with migraine have a 3 times higher incidence. The odds ratio for getting BPPV if you have migraine is 7.5. And about 1/3 of cases of BPPV start at the time of a migraine episode. Patients with Meniere's disease, in which their labyrinth is generally just degenerating and turning into a jalopy, have a higher incidence of BPPV. And there are still being worked out associations of possible increased incidence of BPPV with calcium metabolism, possibly related to decreased daylight in the winter and vitamin D. Metabolism, and even osteoporosis. It's such a common problem. It's probably 20% of all dizziness, but there is a 0.6% annual incidence of first episodes. It is such a common problem that we're sometimes surprised to realize that there is a significant female to male prevalence of BPPV. And one of the reasons for this may be the migraine connection. We do get confused about BPPV, even though we feel like we know something when we see a patient with geotropic rotatory nystagmus in the usual Hall-Pike position. And that is because once we get outside of that level of experience, we start to realize that we don't have as clear a knowledge of the anatomy of the membranous labyrinth as we thought. Sometimes we go to the papers to look at things, but we get confused by the illustrations used, and we don't have a really good enough 3D visualization skills to understand what is happening. Not only that, we have gotten a little rusty with our ability to interpret eye movements using Ewald's laws. So we're going to review that today. In order to help me understand BPPV better, because I'm a visual learner, I realized that we needed a good model. And a model to study BPPV should be based on a membranous labyrinth. We segmented a labyrinth at the Temporal Bone Foundation in Boston, which had an intact apex of the anterior canal, which is hard to find in a temporal bone collection. We segmented it, and at 100 microns, we were able to make a model and then make it perfect using animation software, and then to clone it and position it correctly relative to the skull and relative to the coordinates worked out by Charlie Della Santina and his colleagues at Hopkins, so that we had a model with correctly positioned labyrinths. You can see the anterior angulation of the lateral canal about 25 degrees upward in the forward direction. And there is an upward angulation from medial to lateral of the lateral canal so that the non-ampulated end is lower than the ampulated end. This is very important and explains why the lateral canal, which is the most easily loaded canal, is seen less frequently than we would think. We should see lateral canal BPPV most commonly if it is the most easily loaded canal, but it's also the most easily auto-emptied. So I had this 3D model and I used it for years, but felt selfish having it, and made a more democratic version of it that is available for free download, and that's called the BPPV Viewer. And I encourage you to download and play with it and to challenge your own knowledge and understanding.